Morning students, welcome back once again to our online sessions of Science Class 8. Now, I hope you and your family will find in these pandemic situations of the corona, so I hope without unnecessary work don't go outside the homes. So stay home, stay safe. Now in the previous class of this science, we discussing about the crop production and management. How we can be crop product and how we can be managed and how we can be protect, that we discussing into the previous classes. Also, we discussing about the manures and the fertilizers. Okay, so that we discussing in the previous class. Today is the topics which we have to discussing about, that is called irrigation system. What is called drip irrigations, or what is called fountain irrigations, canal irrigation, etc. So what is called irrigation system? First we have to know about. So irrigation is what? To supply an adequate form of water by any techniques to the crops, that is called irrigation. Generally, crops need to water because it generally needs to be nutrition. So water is a form of hydrogen that can be provided to the crops. So the supply of adequate form of water, or it is the water is supplied to the crops by human efforts, by the specific techniques, that is called irrigation method. So in irrigation method, we have been generally taken that key needed to order to take care about the irrigation system. We have a different type of methods which is generally called as a irrigation system. So to process the water that can be supplied to the crops by the human efforts, that is called irrigation, and there is several methods in which the humans that adopted to supply the water to the crops, that is called irrigation system. Now in irrigation system, general irrigation system, we consider that like canal irrigation, river lift irrigation, well irrigations, as well as the we consider fountain irrigations, tank in which sprinkle methods, and the drip irrigation method. These are the general irrigations methods to provide adequate form of water to the crops by the specific method. First we are discussing about the canal irrigation system, C-A-N-A-L, canal irrigation. So if canal irrigation, if we are discussing about, in canal irrigation system, a main canal, it is of one of the implementation of the biggest and most extensive methods to providing the water. Canal system is one of the most biggest and most extensive irrigation system of the providing the water in our country, that is called canal irrigation system. Now in canal irrigation system, the water is received from the water reservoirs as a form of dams, where the water that can be stored as a form of water reservoirs, that is the dams, where the water that can be collected. There is a specific main canal of channel which is associated with that dam. एक specific channel होती है canals की, वो उस dam के साथ associated होता है. The water that can be received with that primary channels of canal. Now that particular canal have divided into the sub channels, the branches of channel, sub channel which also divided into the branches of channels, like a network structure. One canal divided into the many sub channels that can be divided into the other channels. So water that can be collected from the specific dams from that channel, and which can be divided into the certain area of the channels, and which should be easily used by each and every field as a part of the crops, right? But if you see in your body, there is a specific cell which divide into different cells. So that is a network of cell in your body, like that is canal structure that can be seen. So adequate form of water as a form of water reservoir that is reserved from the specific canal, which is divided into the sub branches, and the sub branches which is divided into the other branches, which is carry the water very long away from to the particular field. So the canal system of maybe a branch channel in our arterial system in our body, that can be also be divided like through. So how we can be controlled? Through the rotation method, which we have controlled that supply of water. The specific field which require the more water, where we can provide the water, and the specific areas which have a specific time limited, according to that they receive the water. So that particularly controlations of rotation method of the supplying of water, that can be generally done into the canal system. After the canal system, there is a well irrigation. Well irrigation is what? Irrigation of water that can be done through the well. If the irrigation of water to the crops that is done through the well, then it is called as what? It is called well irrigation system. In well irrigation system, there is two types. One is called dug well, another is called tube well. Dug well and tube well, these are the two main forms which can be associated as a form of well irrigation system. So what do you mean by the dug well? Now the generally bottom level of ground level of water is considered as a dug well, in which we generally get the accumulated water as a pit level. So that is a dug well. Another is the tube well. Tube well is what? Tube well is generally implemented into the inside of soil with deep as a part of layer and layer. There is a sub PVC pipes which can be implemented layer and layer by the specific formation of the electric motor. When that's reach at the part of the water, it can implementation of through that channel water that can be received. So pipe that can be sunk there, and with the specific motor of electricity, the water that can be comes out by the using of electrical pump or diesel pump, the water that can be comes out. That is called as a tube well. This is another method in which we can be use the water to the crops. These facilities of dug well and tube well have been located where there is a canal system is not sufficient. If the canal system of water is not adequate form of sufficient, then this type of the formation of well irrigation that can be implemented, right? Now next is called river lift system. Now what do you mean by river lift system? River lift system is what? When we see that water is available into the very form of river, and the banks of river if plants are located as a form of crops, अगर उस फील्ड के अंदर नियर ऑफ बैंक ऑफ रिवर हम देखते हैं कि बाय यूजिंग द डीजल पंप which a pipes is generally implemented onto the rivers, and one end of pipe that is received on another end of the field. So by using the diesel pump or formation, water that can be carried from that particular form of river and that can be spread out into the fields. So that is called as a river lift system. The water of river that can be lifted and that is drawn out into the field, which can be located onto the banks of river where the particular farms are cultivated as a form of crops. So that is called river lift system. Next is called tank system. Tank system is a part of water that can be stored in a form of tank, and that can be divided into the two formation. One is called fountain irrigation, that is also known as a fountain, and second is called sprinkle or maybe a drip irrigation system. So fountain irrigations and drip irrigations, what is the main difference of fountain irrigation and drip irrigation? So in fountain irrigation, in this method, the water that should be supplied to crops from a shower, just like a rain. In fountain irrigation, water that can be provided to the crops as like a shower when the rain drops, and which should be moving a very long form. It should be generally required the very high pressure. When you provide so much pressure, whatever the pressure that gets that fountain as a part of the pressure, water that can be moved as a part of particles very larger. So crops from the last end which easily receives the water from the end, and that it is water that can be connected through the pipeline of a main channel through the tanks. That is called as a sprinkle method or drip irrigation method. Now sprinkle method is what? That is one of the part of fountain irrigation which should be available as a sprinkle, and that can be rotated in very large form of adequate form of water that can be available. But what about drip irrigation system? In drip irrigation system, drop by drop of water that can be supplied to the roots of plant. There is a specific drop by drop water that can be supplied to the roots of the plant. So for these, due to that, attach of the small plastic tubes are used. We generally use a small plastic tubes or PVC tubes which are generally headed onto the plants. ये plants होगा, plants के ऊपर हम ऐसे plastics के PVC pipes use करेंगे, और जहाँ पे plants होगा वहाँ छोटे छोटे holes कर देंगे, और ये सारे जो plastic के PVC pipe होंगे that is attached to the main canal of PVC pipe जो एक tank के साथ जुड़ा हुआ रहता है. So when the water that should be provided to the main PVC pipe, which can be divided into sub channels, the water which is passes from that pipes where the drops available as a part of hole, that drop continuously fall onto the plants, and that can be reached to the roots. So it always be reduce the waste of water. So that is called as a drip irrigation system. इसको हम drip irrigation system में consider करते हैं. Now after there is irrigation system, next is called cropping patterns. Cropping patterns. देखो, इज अ पार्ट ऑफ द फील्ड्स वी जनरली हैविंग अ डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ मेथड टू कल्टिवेटिंग द क्रॉप्स. क्रॉप्स को कल्टिवेट करने के लिए हम अलग अलग मेथड्स का यूज करते हैं, इन विच फर्स्ट मिक्स क्रॉपिंग, इंटर क्रॉपिंग एंड क्रॉप रोटेशन. व्हाई इट शुड बी नेसेसरी कि क्रॉप को मिक्स करना है या इंटरचेंज करना है, उसको रोटेट करना है, इट शुड बी नेसेसरी. So first we discussing about what is called cropping patterns. Patterns क्या है? तो in the cultivation of part of a field, various types of the crops that can be methods which should be used to implement it as a higher yield to the crop production. There is a several various method of processes that should be available. By using that process, we have been produce a large number of yield as a part of the crop protection. So we have to be used maximum benefit as we produce the higher amount of yield crops. So that's why it should be beneficiary to use the patterns of crop. It should be needed to be beneficiary if you want to higher amount of production of crops is a single cultivation part of field. We have to use the cropping patterns. In cropping patterns there are three patterns are there. One is called mixed cropping, another is called intercropping, and third is called as a crop rotation. There are generally three methods in which we have to be applied this type of the values. First we are discussing about the mixed cropping. What do you mean by the mixed cropping? Generally mixed cropping, it means what? Ki in mixed cropping, if we consider that seeds which are the different crops, in the mixed cropping, seeds which having the different crops having the same piece of field that can be implemented or may be cultivated. Different type of seeds that can be cultivated on a single piece of land by as a part of the crop production, that is called as a mixed cropping. एक से ज़्यादा क्रॉप्स को, अलग अलग फॉर्मेशन ऑफ दो सीड्स के क्रॉप्स को अगर एक ही पीस ऑफ फील्ड पे हम उसको कल्टिवेटेड करते हैं, देन इट इज कॉल्ड मिक्स क्रॉपिंग. जैसे वीट्स के साथ ग्राम्स उसकी इंप्लीमेंटेशन कर सकते हैं, वीट्स के साथ मस्टर्ड उसका यूज आप कर सकते हैं, ग्राउंडनट के साथ सनफ्लावर, ऐसे मोर देन वन सीड्स दैट कैन बी इंप्लीमेंटेड ऑन द सेम पीस ऑफ फील्ड. दिस टाइप ऑफ द मेथड ऑफ क्रॉप पैटर्निंग दैट इज कॉल्ड मिक्स क्रॉपिंग. नाउ व्हाट इज द एडवांटेजेस ऑफ मिक्स क्रॉपिंग? क्यों हम ऐसा करेंगे? क्यों हम केवल वीट की ही कल्टिवेशन नहीं करेंगे या वीट के साथ मस्टर्ड या सनफ्लावर का क्यों यूज करेंगे? जनरली द बेसिक ऑब्जेक्टिव ऑफ द मिक्स क्रॉपिंग, इसका सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट होता है कि इफ टू अवॉइड द रिस्क ऑफ फेल्यूर ड्यू टू द इंक्रीजिंग वेदर कंडीशन. इफ यू आर यूजिंग द मोर देन वन क्रॉप्स ऑन अ सिंगल फील्ड, द मेन ऑब्जेक्टिव इज व्हाट? इट शुड बी रिड्यूस द फेल्यूर ऑफ क्रॉप. अगर क्रॉप फेल भी होता है कोई एक बाय द सम वेदर कंडीशंस, तो दूसरे क्रॉप्स पे उसका इफेक्ट नहीं हो सकता है. तो एट अ टाइम यू कैन बी मैनेज एटलीस्ट वन क्रॉप. So mixed cropping generally helps to avoid the risk of crop failure. एक अगर होता है तो दूसरा यूज हो सकता है, तो it should be avoid the failure risk of the crop patterning. तो ये पहला हो गया mixed cropping. Second is called intercropping. Intercropping में क्या होता है? Intercropping is generally a practice of crops on a same field that can be implemented the crops more than two or two crops simultaneously on the same field, that is called intercropping. दो या दो से ज़्यादा पीस ऑफ कल्टिवेशन प्लांट को अगर सेम पीस ऑफ फील्ड ऑफ लैंड पे इंप्लीमेंट करते हैं तो देन इट इज कॉल्ड एज अ इंटरक्रॉपिंग मेथड. एंड इंटरक्रॉपिंग हैविंग अ स्पेसिफिक डिफाइनाइट रो पैटर्न. इसमें एक डिफाइनाइट रो रखना पड़ेगा और उसकी पैटर्न्स को मेंटेन करनी पड़ेगी. Mixed cropping doesn't require any specific row pattern, but intercropping having more than two crops on a same field generally require the specific type of the row patterns. That should be an intercropping part. So main objective of intercropping that is specifically major crop or even two or three crops that can be intercropped in a specific cultivation of planted. तो एक या दो नहीं पर दो से ज्यादा क्रॉप्स को आप साइमल्टेनियसली सेम पीस ऑफ लैंड पे अगर कल्टिवेटेड करते हैं विद द स्पेसिफिक रो पैटर्न, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज अ इंटरक्रॉपिंग. अभी इंटरक्रॉपिंग क्या क्या बेनिफिट है, क्या हमें उससे पता चलेगा, क्या फंक्शंस, क्या बेनिफिट्स होंगे, व्हाई इट शुड बी नेसेसरी और क्यों इसका इंप्लीमेंटेशन हम करते हैं. So when they use the intercropping with the specific row or pattern, it enhances the more use of the natural resources like sunlight, water, temperature, air. The most of whatever the natural resources that available as a part of the crop field, mostly they use this type of the resources. उसका वो सबसे ज़्यादा use कर सकते हैं if they have in a definite row and pattern. एंड दैट कैन बी इजीली कंज्यूम सेपरेटली, आप उसको इजीली कंज्यूम कर सकते हैं, हार्वेस्टिंग करने के समय आप इजीली उसको हार्वेस्ट कर सकते हैं, तो दैट शुड बी मोर बेनिफिशियल फॉर अस। इसके अंदर फर्टिलाइजर्स और उसका यूज करके भी एज पर द रिक्वायरमेंट ऑफ द सीड्स यू हैव टू प्रोवाइड दिस टाइप ऑफ सब्सटेंसेस इज अ पार्ट ऑफ द न्यूट्रिएंट। ये होता है आपका इंटरक्रॉपिंग। थर्ड होता है क्रॉप रोटेशन। रोटेशन मतलब क्या, एक स्पेसिफिक टाइम के बाद इन अ स्पेसिफिक टाइम ऑफ इंटरवल वी चेंज अ स्पेसिफिक क्रॉप, एक क्रॉप के बाद दूसरे क्रॉप, तीसरे क्रॉप। जैसे एग्जांपल लेते हैं, इफ वी टेक आवर डिनर, लंच और ब्रेकफास्ट, if same type of food if we taken daily it should be like unfulness, आपको अच्छा नहीं लगेगा, you just need some other substances a part of food, कुछ नया चाहिए आपको। तो same as it is crops as a part of single field, it need to be a specific time of interval that crop had been changed, that is called crop rotation. Crop rotation is generally a process of growing the crops in the more than one formation of the specific time on a same piece of land. You will take 1 year, 2 year or maybe 3 years. After the gap difference you can just take more than one crops at a specific timing, that is called crop rotation. So why we need to be crop rotate, हमें क्यों जरूरी है crop rotate करना, why it should be necessary to be crop rotated? So if growing one type of crop, if we growing the one type of crop on the same piece of land for the years and years, it generally reduce the fertility of soil, वो soil की fertility को reduce करता है। It absorbs all this type of nutrition that over and over that it should be lost the fertility. So इसीलिए हमें एक specific adequate of time पे इस तरह के crop rotation को change करना चाहिए, नए नए crops patterns use करने चाहिए ताकि soil की fertility maintain रह सके, उसके अंदर जो minerals और nutrition है वो balance रह सके। So that's why crop rotation is essential। ठीक है, अभी next topic आता है crop protection। crop को हम कैसे protect कर सकते हैं? देखो क्रॉप पे भी दो तरीके के फॉर्मेशन हो सकते हैं। प्रोटेक्शन मतलब उसको बचाना, लाइक ह्यूमन बॉडी देयर इज अ डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ डिजीज व्हिच हैव बीन डन बाय द इफेक्ट ऑफ वायरस, बैक्टीरिया और सम अदर माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स। Similarly, like plants have the effects by this type of the microorganism. Plants have also defects of the disease. So इसमें सबसे पहला तो फॉर्मेशन आता है कि इम्प्लीमेंटेशन हमें क्रॉप प्रोटेक्ट कैसे करना चाहिए, हाउ वी कैन बी प्रोटेक्ट द क्रॉप्स। सो पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ द फील्ड क्रॉप्स अफेक्टेड बाय द सेवरल फैक्टर्स, द क्रॉप विच इज कल्टिवेटेड इन अ पार्ट ऑफ फील्ड which is generally affected by the several factors like weeds, insects as well as the disease or pest which have generally affected to the crops, उसकी ग्रोथ को रिड्यूस करता है। तो उसके अंदर से जो कल्टीवेशन होना चाहिए, जो प्रॉपरली अमाउंट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन होना चाहिए, इट कैन नॉट बी प्रॉपरली जनरेटेड। तो दैट्स व्हाई क्रॉप प्रोटेक्शन इज नेसेसरी। So if this type of effect like weeds, insecticide, pest, this affected to the crops, it generally gives the economical loss because you don't get such enough production of crops, so it is a economical loss for the farmers. So if economical loss of farmers, then what we have to do to protect the crops? अगर हमें क्रॉप को प्रोटेक्ट करना है, देन व्हाट वी हैव टू डू अप्लाइड। लाइक देखिए क्रॉप प्रोटेक्शन में अलग अलग तरीके के इफेक्ट्स होते हैं। लाइक एक स्क्रैप रूट आता है, एक लीव्स को खा जाते हैं, एक स्टीम्स को खा जाते हैं, एक फ्रूट को खराब करते हैं। ऐसे अलग अलग तरीके के डिजीज जो है अलग तरीके के पेस्ट या इंसेक्टिसाइड्स या उस तरह से होते हैं। सो वी हैव टू बी एडॉप्ट लाइक इंसेक्ट पेस्ट कंट्रोलर, पेस्ट कंट्रोल जो है उसका स्प्रे करना चाहिए। डिजीज कंट्रोलर, उसके लिए अलग अलग तरह के डिजीज जो सीड्स है उसका प्रॉपरली इंप्लीमेंटेशन करना चाहिए। So combining of this type of capacity of insect pest controller or disease controller or weeds control by using we have to be protect the crops. तो उसी में एक वर्ड्स आता है weeds, यहाँ मैंने लिखा है that is called weeds. What do you mean by the weeds? How we can be control the weeds? Now first of all, if we consider about the weeds, the unwanted plants which grow on the surfaces of the cultivated crop, that is called weeds. The unwanted plant which generally grows at the near of surfaces of crop, that is generally called as a weeds. उसको weeds कहते हैं, यानी कि जो आपने कल्टीवेशन ऑफ क्रॉप किया है उसके आसपास, उसके नियर बाई सर्फेसिस पे जो अनवांटेड प्लांट्स जो ग्रो हो जाते हैं उसको हम weeds कहते हैं, that is generally called as a weeds. Now what are the effects of the weeds of the growth of the plant? जैसे अभी मैंने आपको समझा है कि प्लांट प्रोटेक्शन में weeds is one of the important factor. तो व्हाट आर द इफेक्ट्स ऑफ द वीड्स दैट हैव बीन डन इनटू द ग्रोथ ऑफ प्लांट, प्लांट के ग्रोथ में वीड्स का क्या सबसे ज्यादा रोल प्ले होता है। जनरली इफ यू सी दैट वीड्स आर जनरली ऑन अ सरफेसेस ऑफ प्लांट्स, प्लांट्स के सरफेसेस के आसपास वीड्स होते हैं, तो वीड्स जनरली कंज्यूम द सनलाइट एज वेल एज एयर फ्रॉम द सॉइल एंड द अदर न्यूट्रिशन एंड मिनरल्स विच इज अवेलेबल इनटू द सॉइल। तो जो सॉइल के अंदर मिनरल्स है, एलिमेंट्स है, वाटर्स है, या एटमॉस्फेयर के अंदर सनलाइट है या एयर है, दैट ऑल हैव बीन बाइफरगेटेड, डाइवर्टेड इनटू द वीड्स, वीड्स भी उसका यूज करेंगे। तो इफ वीड्स यूज दिस टाइप ऑफ द सब्सटेंसेस which cannot be deliver as much as possible to the plants, तो जो plants को चाहिए उतने तो उसको मिलेंगे नहीं, so that's why if the plant do not get this type of the particular minerals elements, the growth of plant exhibited, वो धीरे धीरे उसका growth जो होगा वो कम होने लगता है। So comparison to the cultivation crops, these weeds are so much, comparison to the weeds, they are so much faster they can be grow, weeds are so faster grow comparison to the cultivated crops. So there is what, there is a lack of nutrition that got by the plants. So in a specific time of interval we have to remove the weeds in the near of surfaces of plants, so the plants that get enough nutrition from the soil, so that should be implemented as a part of the growth. So ये जो होता है वो growth के लिए उसका यूज किया जाता है। Now, अभी हम डिस्कशन करते हैं कि if we are preparing the soil before the cultivation of crops, if we need to be cultivation of crops, before that we have to be adopt such a kind of techniques in which we have written like preparation of soil as well as sowing, weeding, threshing. What is this? What are these definitions about them? So if we are discussing about these topics in which we consider in the previous topic कि हम जो डिस्कशन कर रहे हैं कि खरीफ क्रॉप क्या है या उसके अलावा जो रेनी सीजन क्रॉप है वो क्या है, क्रॉप को हम कैसे प्रोटेक्ट कर सकते हैं, कैसे मैनेज कर सकते हैं, दैट्स डिस्कसिंग। तो जैसे भी आप क्रॉप्स को कल्टिवेटेड करते हैं, व्हेन यू स्टार्ट टू बी कल्टिवेटिंग द क्रॉप्स, यू हैव टू बी नीड सम बेसिक थिंग्स विच हैव टू बी टेकन केयर। उसमें आपको बहुत चीज़ें होती है जो आपको ध्यान रखनी पड़ती है। इसमें सबसे पहला जो फॉर्मेशन आता है प्रिपरेशन ऑफ सॉइल। Now what do you mean by the preparation of soil? Now soil preparation is necessary before growing a crops. If you need to growing a crops is a part of the cultivation, preparation of soil is very much necessary. It involves tilling and losing the soil. उसको टिल करना या soil को lose करना, ये दोनों एक important factor होता है before implementation of soil. So it should be tilling and losing the soil before implementation of the seeds, that is called preparation of soil. It allows the roots to preparate the deep into the soil. जो roots होते हैं ना वो directly उस preparate होते हैं soil के अंदर and then breathe easily when they have to start to be growth as a part of the new organism. तो इसीलिए हमें soil का preparation करना काफी जरूरी होता है। उसके बाद आता है sowing, SOWING, sowing. Sowing means what? Now the process of putting the seeds into that cultivation, the farm or into the soil, the process that enter the soil into the seeds is called as a sowing. आप जो seeds को implement करते हैं soil के अंदर उसको हम sowing कहते हैं। The tool which is used in the modern techniques, the tool which is used traditionally for the sowing the seeds, that is called funnel shape. उसके ऊपर funnel shape होता है और उसमें seeds रखते हैं और जैसे आप उसको tilling करते हैं the seeds that can be easily cultivated as a form of stem. So nowadays seed generally drills under the sowing. उसके लिए हम drill करके क्या करते हैं, by using the drilling method with the help of tractor we just sowing the seed into the soil. So that is called as a sowing method. Next is called threshing. वीडिंग, पहले तो वीडिंग क्या होता है, तो सम अनडिजायरेबल प्लांट्स विच शुड बी सीन इन द सर्फेसेस ऑफ प्लांट विच कैन बी रिमूव बाय अ स्पेसिफिक मेथड, सो दैट अनवांटेड प्लांट विल रिमूव बाय द स्पेसिफिक टेक्निक्स, दैट इज कॉल्ड वीडिंग. नेक्स्ट इज कॉल्ड थ्रेसिंग. थ्रेसिंग क्या होता है, द प्रोसेस ऑफ सेपरेशन ऑफ द ग्रेन्स फ्रॉम द क्राफ्ट. ओके, तो वो जो शेफ होता है उसमें से सीड्स को अलग करने की जो प्रोसेस होती है दैट इज कॉल्ड एज अ थ्रेसिंग. तो दैट शुड बी क्लियर कि अगर प्रिपरेशन ऑफ सॉइल क्या है, सोइंग क्या है, वीडिंग क्या है और थ्रेसिंग मेथड क्या है. उसके अलावा हम देखते हैं फर्टिलाइजर्स के बारे में और मैन्यूअर्स के बारे में भी आपको मैंने कल ऑलरेडी पहले भी समझा दिया है. उसके बाद इरिगेशन मेथड के बारे में भी आपको समझा दिया है कि ड्रिप इरिगेशन क्या है, रिवर लिफ्ट सिस्टम क्या है, स्प्रिंकल सिस्टम क्या है. तो खरीफ सीजन के बारे में अगर हम देखें तो व्हीट क्रॉप इज जनरली implemented into the month of November and December. तो वो खरीफ सीजन के क्रॉप्स में होते हैं. as well as March and April. So it is grown into the winter and require the less water. Kharif season generally implemented into the winter and require the less water, so it should be production will be less decreasable. इसीलिए जो होता है weeds जो होते हैं मोस्ट ऑफली खरीफ सीजन क्रॉप्स में इम्प्लीमेंटेशन किए जाते हैं. तो कंटिन्यूअसली अगर आप प्लांटेशन करते हैं, इफ यू कंटिन्यूअसली प्लांटेशन ऑफ सम ऑफ द वीड्स, इट्स टेक अप द सर्टेन न्यूट्रिशन फ्रॉम द प्लांट्स, तो सॉइल की फर्टिलिटी धीरे धीरे लॉस होती है, इसलिए आपको उसका प्लांट का रोटेशन करना भी चाहिए, क्रॉप का रोटेशन करना भी चाहिए. समर क्रॉप जो होता है समर सीजन्स के अंदर, रैबी क्रॉप आपके रेनी सीजन्स के अंदर, खरीफ क्रॉप आपके विंटर सीजन्स के अंदर होते हैं. ठीक है, सो टुडे ओनली वी डिस्कसिंग अबाउट दिस टॉपिक. कल हम जब मिलेंगे तो बाकी आगे के टॉपिक के साथ डिस्कशन करेंगे. टिल students will meet tomorrow for the new topics about this crop production and management. So whatever we studied today, just revise it and make a notes and be implementation the all the topics what we have to study in this lecture. So for today enough, we'll be met tomorrow with the another topics. Bye.